Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head down to Chile once again, and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel now a couple of times before. So these guys are a really quite interesting brewery. They're a real pioneer of the Chilean craft beer scene, and if you're particularly interested in like wild ales and barrel-aged stuff, then this is one of the breweries that you really want to check out. So the beer that we're going to have a look at today is a style that I very much enjoy, one of my favourite German styles of beer, and one that I don't get to review all that often. I wish I could review these more, but this one really has a twist to it that I've never encountered with this style before, and I'm really curious to see how this one turns out. So hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to go to a little town called Quilpué, which is in the Valparaiso area to the west of Santiago, the Chilean capital, and that means that we're going to have a look at another beer from the wonderful Cerveza Granizo. So this particular beer is simply called number 7 Doppelbrett. It comes in at 13% ABV, and this one is a Doppelbock aged in wine barrels for 18 months with Brettanomyces. So yeah, very unusual beer, this one. I love Doppelbocks, but I've never come across one, I think, that contains Brettanomyces, nor have I ever come across one that's been aged in wine barrels. So yeah, this should be quite unusual, and after 4,200 odd beer reviews, you want things that are going to test your palate, and I think it's safe to say that this beer will certainly do that. A massive shout out to the lovely Miss Amanda in this one. She bought this beer for me in Chile and then brought it all the way to Hong Kong, and this is her favourite Chilean brewery, so I know she really likes it when I review the Granizo stuff here on the channel, and hopefully we can get down to Chile and try some of their beers in their native land. I'm sure that will happen within the next couple of years actually, but you will see a few Granizo beers over the next few videos, so I hope you enjoy learning a little bit about the Chilean craft beer scene once again. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see how we go. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Cerveza Granizo before, and like I said, you will see more videos popping up from this brewery over the next little while, as well as some other Chilean breweries actually, so keep your eyes peeled for those. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, province, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Chilean playlist along with a number of other things. That's being added to whenever I get the opportunity, but do make sure you check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well, because there are some very interesting things on the channel these days, even if I do say so myself. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit about Cerveza Granizo then. So Cerveza Granizo, or Cervecería Granizo, I'm not sure exactly what the best way to call these guys is. It was born in the heart of the Granizo district in Olmué in Chile, which is very close to Valparaiso. So Cerveza Granizo takes its name from the area of El Granizo in the, or near the La Campana National Park, which is very well known for its rich biodiversity. But the company was founded by Oscar Garrido back in 2011. So Oscar is an agronomist by trade, and he has extensive experience in wine production across Chile and other countries. So he studied his Master of Viticulture and Enology, basically wine science and wine making, in Spain back in 2009, and while he was in Europe he had access to a much wider beer offering than he had had back in Chile, and he realised that the craft beer world was quite spectacular. So before returning home to Chile, he worked for a time in a vineyard in New Zealand, and then he also worked in the United States, and both of these countries of course had a brewing history much more advanced than that of Chile itself at the time. So in his free time he tasted and brewed different beers there for himself, and eventually he decided that he was going to swap grapes for for hops. So he founded Cerveza Granizo officially in 2011, and he was serving both as a partner and head brewer and overseeing their barrel aging program. And their barrel program is what really kind of shot this brewery to fame. It's received international acclaim. But he also participates as a beer judge and takes part in competitions across South America and further afield. But later on in 2016, Herman Fritsch joined Granizo as a partner, and this led to a big increase in their production volume. So Herman is a commercial engineer from Santiago, but he has German ancestry, as you can potentially tell from his name, and so he studied at the German School of Santiago, during which time he had the opportunity to do a study exchange in his teenage years, and then later during his university years he went on exchange again and went on to explore Germany, the Czech Republic and other places in Europe, and of course he went and tasted a lot of the beers. But upon returning to Chile, he founded Cask Chile in 2014, which is a beer import company, and the objective he had there was to bring some of his favourite foreign beers into the country. But then in 2016 he joined Granizo after a years-long friendship with Oscar, and that same year the brewery decided to relocate to Quilpue, which is closer to Valparaiso. So Granizo operates a tap room called Quercus, which originally opened in Viña del Mar in 2019, but then recently relocated to Santiago in 2023. They have over 20 taps there with a wide variety of different beers. But that year, Oscar also left the company to work as head brewer for Phantom Farms Brewing in Rhode Island up in the US. But over the years, the brewery has earned multiple medals in various competitions, both national and international, and it's really established itself as the top-rated brewery in Chile, according to Untappd. They're known for their barrel program, as I've repeated a few times in this video, and much of this finds its roots in Oscar's knowledge of the wine industry, and so they use a wide variety of wine, pisco, rum, and other barrels to age a wide variety of different beer styles. But they've also become very well known for their use of adjuncts in recent years as well, from what I understand. But as of May 2025, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 135 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and that number will no doubt continue to increase as time goes on. But yeah, that is everything I can tell you about Cervecería Granizo for the moment. If you want to learn a little bit more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, or you can check out the Untappd page to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, now I can take a breath, because yeah, that one is getting a little bit steamy in here. The weather's picking up in Hong Kong again with the high temperature. And yeah, that was just a little bit of a mouthful. So yeah, let's go on and actually have a little look at the beer itself. So the other thing I should point out about Granizo is that the brewery symbol, if you like, or the brewery, what we call it, the brewery logo, is this little snowflake here. So apparently Granizo translates from Spanish into English as meaning like hail, like hailstones, I guess. So the little snowflake, I think, is supposed to kind of symbolize that. But there you can see the artwork on this one. I think this is maybe the first bottled Granizo beer that I've had. I think the other 2 or 3 that we reviewed have all been in cans, and certainly the other ones you'll see in later videos are all in cans as well. But this one is 375 milliliters, plain black bottle cap, as you can see there, if the camera decides it's going to focus. But yeah, it looks very, very nice. So it says this one is best before the 29th of July 2029, and I'm guessing it was bottled on the 29th of July 2019. So we're actually drinking this beer at about 5 years old, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, this one, yeah, especially when you've got Brettanomyces involved, this should be very, very interesting. But when it comes to the Doppelbock style, it's worth remembering that this style is actually a lager beer. So the technical definition of a lager is that it undergoes fermentation using a bottom fermenting yeast. It's low temperature fermentation, 8 to 12 degrees Celsius. And yeah, the Bock style of beer comes from the German city of Einbeck, and it became known as, they became known as the Bocks because when the Einbeckers took their beer to Munich, the Münchners made fun of their accent and said it sounded like the word Bock, which is goat. So that's why many Doppelbocks have goat symbols on them. But yeah, anyway. And this one, as I say, the very first time I've come across a Doppelbock beer with Brettanomyces in it, or indeed one that is aged in wine barrels. But yeah, just 13% ABV. This one will be a little bit of a monster, but this one is from their Granizo series. There's quite a few beers in this series, and these are meant to be their best barrel aged things that they do. So yeah, Amanda brought me something pretty damn special here, so again, kudos to her for making this review possible. But yeah, let's get it out into the glass then and see what it's all about. I'm very curious about this. So, nice little bit of smoke on the opening, and we'll get this guy out and into the glass. And I'll tell you, when you open this thing up, you can smell the influence of the wine barrels in here. But this looks really nice actually. Yeah, we're going to get no head on this. You can see that when we poured it, it had a... Yeah, you can see that when we poured it, it had a little bit of a kind of light tan head on it, but that's just faded away to be absolutely nothing, and we're left with this lovely kind of dark rosewoody, dark chestnutty coloured beer underneath. So yeah, remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will affect its colour as well. That can vary from, that can vary for a lot of different things. But when it comes to the Doppelbock style, because this one is a brown beer rather than a black beer, this one these can be affected by the adjuncts that you put in. So yeah, maybe the barrel has had a little bit of an effect on the colour of this one, and yeah, perhaps the Brettanomyces might have a little effect as well, but we'll wait and see. But all in all, this one is pretty much in line with what you would expect appearance-wise from a Doppelbock. It's one of the darker ones that I've come across. Not a lot of visible carbonation in this one though. Yeah, you can see the beer is pretty much just like a big syrupy liquid, in all honesty. But yeah, I like the way that this one appears actually. It looks like a very cam sort of thing, but I tell you something, when you open up, you got a big whiff of aroma out of it. But yeah, nothing else we really need to say about the appearance of this beer then. And to be honest, the other thing we should say is that at 13% ABV, you wouldn't expect much of a head on this beer. But yeah, let's go on and have a little look at the aroma of this one. I'm very, very curious about this, as I said. So let's do it. Right, okay. This is something just very, very unique, in honesty. I've had a couple of beers that this reminds me of, in a sense. It has some of the qualities of, like, the aroma profile of this one. It's kind of a bit like a Flanders Red in a way. It's not a million miles away from that, but you've got so much more oiliness and brown sugar coming out of it. That's what really kind of makes it stand out that wee bit more, in all honesty. But yeah, it's just so unusual, this, in a sense. But yeah, I think the closest thing you're going to be able to compare this to is maybe like, yeah, a Flanders Red, a Belgian Flanders Red, or maybe like an Italian Grey Pale or something like this. I think these are probably the two closest things you're going to get to this. But it kind of gives you everything you'd expect when you think about what this beer is. You've got lovely kind of sharper red wine notes coming out of this one, really sharp kind of, well, it seems like it might be a mix of white wine and red wine, because you've got the more sharp vinous characters of the white wine, but the deeper characters of the red wine as well. You've got the big brown sugars of the Doppelbock, and then yeah, you've got some of the you've got the other kind of the kind of fruitiness out of it too. But yeah, let's just try and break down the aroma then and describe it for you a wee bit more in depth. Kind of wish I'd saved this beer for like a special number of review or something, to be honest, because it's just so unusual actually. But yeah, we wanted to try it. So yeah, the backbone of this beer, you've got a lovely sort of smooth oaky character in there. So I've often said European oak is a little bit drier than North American oak. It's different species of tree, of course, but the North American oak is just that little bit smoother, and I've got a feeling that this is North American oak that's involved in this one, because you just get that little bit more vanilla out of the wood and that slightly smoother character to it. But of course, above that, you're starting to get the winey notes, and I think, yeah, it's got the sharpness of white wine, but some of the richness of the, yeah, it's got the richness of the kind of more red wine character, actually. Chile, of course, has a wonderful wine scene. From what I've seen, I'm not the greatest wine fan, but I can appreciate a nice wine if I'm given it to taste. I've got the palate to do that. But yeah, the winey backbone in this one, yeah, I think I'm more tempted to say it's a red wine. I get the feeling like a red wine barrel would fit more with the nature of the Doppelbock, in honesty. So yeah, the nice oaky character, the wee bit of vanilla, and then the big sort of red wine grapey, the purple grapes in this one really come out, but there is a wee bit of a white wine grapey vinous sharpness in the top of the nose at the front there for sure. But if you take the aroma in a bit more deeply, you get the lovely big sort of sticky brown sugars of the Doppelbock. There's a little bit of that kind of rye bready bread crust, sweet German rye bread in there, leathery brown sugar, treacle molasses, these sort of things. You're getting sweeter caramel, little bits of fudge, little bit of biscuit, and all of these kind of things. A little hint of nuttiness as well. These are all things that you would expect of the kind of OG Doppelbock style. Eyinger is, of course, the Eyinger Celebrator is one of the benchmarks of this style for me, of course. That's probably the most common one you get across the world, actually. So yeah, you can smell the kind of leathery brown sugary notes out of this one. Remember, with Doppelbocks, one thing that they do like to do with those beers is give them a slightly longer wort boil, because it makes the brown sugars more leathery and gives you that more kind of complex, woody, kind of nutty flavour. You can smell a little bit of that going on in this beer for sure. But yeah, aroma-wise, this one is, as I say, really pretty damn nice. You know, once your nose adjusts to the kind of sour side of this beer and the barrel side of it, you get a lot of the nice kind of malty and subtle notes from the actual Doppelbock part of the beer as well, which I do really quite like. So yeah, that is definitely noticeable in this one. Now, in terms of the yeasty side of this one, you get some of the yeasty character at the back of the nose here. For me, the yeasty character in this beer is quite, it's kind of more, it's like a sweet German pumpernickel, or like a kind of fruit bread, something like that. Almost very slightly Christmas puddingy, like an English Christmas pudding. So there's a little bit of that going on in this one. But you also have, you've also got a little element of kind of rye bread to it, and some toasty, sweet brown sugars going on, like a kind of caramelized, like a kind of caramelized honey or something like that. Does that even make sense to say caramelized honey? Yeah, you've got this really sweet, brown sugary kind of character, mixing in with that Christmas pudding for sure at the back of the nose. But yeah, the yeasty character for me in this one is more Christmas pudding rather than anything else. But I think we've covered the kind of malty and yeasty side of this beer and that part of the aroma quite in depth with this one. So let's look at the hoppy and fruity side of things with this one then. So when it comes to a Doppelbock, the hop that you would most commonly use with these in Germany would be the Northern Brewer, because it gives you that lovely kind of figgy and blackcurranty type flavour. But when it comes to barrel-aged beers like this, I'm pretty sure they have used hops in this one, but with this one being about 5 years old, a lot of the hoppy character will have dropped out of it. And you have to remember, when you're using, I'm not sure whether the aim of this one was to be like a wild ale sour beer. I'm guessing it was kind of meant to be like, you know, the wine barrel is going to impart some of those sour beer type qualities on it, and the Brettanomyces is going to do that as well. But what you would normally do with a wild ale is you'd use older hops that wouldn't take away, they'd lose some of their alpha acid potency, so that wouldn't take away from the sourness of the beer. But this one, I'd be very curious to see the brew sheet and see exactly what they've done here, because even though this beer is about 5 years old, you are still getting the remnants of some of that lovely German noble quality in there. There's a little bit of like earthiness and herbal character. You can still pick up a little hint of grassiness and floral character out of this one, but as I say, it's very minimal because a lot of that will have dropped out of this one, but I'm pretty sure they will have used, if not the German Northern Brewer, a North American equivalent, or even maybe even a local equivalent. Because Chile, of course, there's a lot of German people, or German heritage people in Argentina and Chile, so probably they had produced a lot of their own hops in either country. But yeah, you can smell a little bit of that noble character coming out of this one. But the fruity side of the beer from the hops, you definitely get little hints of like plums, prunes, figs, and like, you know, a bit of blackcurrant. I don't know if I'd go as far as like blackberries, it's not quite sharp enough for that. But of course, all the grapey characters, the sort of grapey notes from the barrel are the things that really kind of jump out of this one at you, I would say. So yeah, aroma wise, this thing is very, very unique, and I expect the same from the flavour, in all honesty. So as I always say, take a wee bit of time to just enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But I think it is about time that we taste this one and see what it's all about. So yeah, this one is the number 7 Doppelbrett, a 13% Doppelbock, aged in wine barrels for 18 months with Brettanomyces. Yeah, this is going to be pretty damn unique, I think. So let's have a taste and see how we go. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Massive thank you to Miss Amanda once again. Salut. Ooh. Right. This beer really reminds me of one that I had in Gdansk in Poland. There was a brew pub right next to the train station in Gdansk, and they had this big brown sugary beer there. And it was a little bit like a kind of wild, you know, the way the guy did it, he showed me in the video, what was it, Brovar Chetire or something like this, number 4. It really reminds me of this because the guy, the brewer at this brewery, lovely man, German guy, he gave me a taste of that beer that he was making in the basement and showed me where it was made and let me film it all. This thing really reminds me of that. Yeah, it's kind of funny where some of these videos can take you, but yeah, it really reminds me of a beer that I tried in Poland, of all places. But of course, that area of Poland was German once upon a time. So yeah, it's really interesting on this. So in the beginning, it comes across really like one of these big wine barrel aged sour beers, if you like, wild ales, but it shows you more of its kind of oily Doppelbock qualities into the aftertaste. But yeah, this one, it really is, yeah, it's really kind of planting its flag in the wild ale category, this, rather than anything else. Yeah, not many breweries would think to try something like this, so you have to really take your hat off to Granizo and salute them for actually thinking to try something like this. It's not something that I would think to do if I was brewing a beer, for sure. But yeah, let's just try and break this down and describe the flavour more in depth for you. This is going to be a slightly longer tasting for sure, I can tell you that right away. But yeah, when you take this beer in, you've got a lot of impact flavour, and that's from the kind of, you know, you get that impact flavour, and that's from the vinous side, or vinous, I never know how to pronounce that, the vinous side of the barrel in there. So just behind, you know, in that border region between front and middle third of your tongue, you get the kind of vinous attack that comes in, and you just get that little bit of sharpness out of the beer, which is very, very nice, like I said. But yeah, we'll start on the middle third of the palate then, as we always do. So the backbone of this beer is unquestionably that lovely oaky woody character there. It gets a little bit drier into the aftertaste, and the oak almost has a slightly leathery kind of character to it. But yeah, further forward on that middle third of your palate, you get a little hint of vanilla there, but you get that nice oily layer of different grapey notes coming out of it. And from the flavour, it comes across as being a little bit more, it's got a little bit more of a white winey character for me. I would say it doesn't seem quite dark and fruity enough to be red wine for me. Yeah, it's more of a white winey character that I'm getting out of this one. But my memory of Chilean wine is that it's a bit more oily and a bit more kind of like juicy in comparison to some of the other wines that I've come across. I remember Slovenian wine was very oily as well. So yeah, you've got this oily, I would say white green grapey sort of layer sitting on top of the wood, and then of course you start to get the elements of the Doppelbock coming out of the beer. And this is one of these flavour combinations that kind of just works. So the Doppelbock side of the beer is actually quite oily and quite slick, so you don't, I mean, you get a little hint of like rye bready bread crust in there on top of the wine, but it's very, very minimal, and it comes out more into the aftertaste. But you can feel a layer above that of like a really oily and dense, sweet rye bread for sure. Then there's a wholemeal brown bready layer, and those layers are so dense that they feel like really quite oily. There's little elements of nutty flavour in there, but then above those bready layers you start to get the kind of brown sugary side of things. So you've got this leathery brown sugary character sitting on top of that. Then it's got a little bit of a kind of toasty brown sugary layer, and then in the dead centre of your palate you feel that big oily circle, which is the kind of treacle molasses side of things. So yeah, that lovely big kind of treacly molasses type quality that comes out of the beer, and that is of course the alcohol with this one. So yeah, these are flavours that you would kind of expect of a Doppelbock. It's not overly leathery, it doesn't feel like it's had an overly long wort boil, but of course I think that the barrel aging might well have affected that. I would have been curious to try the original Doppelbock, or the base Doppelbock if we can call it that went into this. But yeah, other than that, the only other thing I would add about the middle third of the palate is there's a little bit of a kind of biscuity flavour comes out of it into the aftertaste, and some of the juiciness and oiliness from the wine side of this beer really pushes its way out as well. But yeah, that's the middle third of your palate in this one. So yeah, I like that about this beer for sure. Pardon me. So I think we've covered everything we need to about the middle third of the palate then. Let's go to the back third of your palate then. So as I've often said, middle third and back third of your palate are going to show you similar flavours but just at different intensities. But do remember that sweeter flavours are going to come out further forward on the palate, more dry and bitter flavours will come out further back. So yeah, the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get a little bit of bready build up in there, the kind of more rye bready character in the base and the more wholemeal brown bready character on top of that. They're quite oily and quite dense though in a way, and they feel a bit more brown sugary. But yeah, the base of that back third of your palate, of course, you get the kind of wine barley wood, which is that little bit drier. You can feel the nice wine grapes above that, which feel a little bit more darker and juicy. But then yeah, little touch of the rye bready bread crust. The rye bready layer sits above that, which feels a little bit lighter, taller, more airy. The back third of your palate is definitely more bready rather than being really dense and oily in a way. So you've got the rye bready layer in there, the kind of sweet wholemeal pumpernickel type bread, yeah, more of a pumpernickel bread actually, like a fruit bread above that, and then yeah, a more kind of wholemeal brown bready character above that, and you can feel the kind of toasty brown sugars and leathery brown sugars just creeping over the top of that, and then you've got all of the yeasty sort of notes out of this one. So yeah, the way that this side of the beer goes together I think is really quite nice. Let's focus on that yeasty character. So yeah, the yeasty side of the beer, for me, it's kinda like sort of English, Scottish Christmas pudding, and I know that because my dad used to love getting Christmas pudding in February for his birthday, which I always thought was funny. So it's got that. At its core, the yeasty character has this kind of English, Scottish Christmas pudding type quality, you know, like a really phenolic, sort of spicy fruitcake. It's kind of like that. Well, not spicy. Spicy is not the right word. Like a really phenolic, brown sugary fruitcakey sort of thing. That's what you're really getting at the core of the yeasty side of this beer, and then it's just surrounded by a layer of like, you know, caramelly, toasty brown sugar for sure. And yeah, that I think is how you would describe the yeasty character in this one. Definitely the back third of your palate, you would feel the flavour is taller. Then as you move further forward into the middle third of your palate, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together in that sense, I think, is really quite nice. So yeah, malty yeasty side of this beer I really do quite like, in fact. And the barrel, the way the barrel comes out and gives you that wee bit of juiciness on the end is really interesting too. So yeah, let's focus on the hoppy and fruity side of this beer then, just to round off the flavour section of the video. So yeah, as I said, this beer's 5 years old. A lot of the hoppy character is kind of dropped out of it, and you get that smoothness around the edge of the palate there. But yeah, the way that everything kind of pieces together otherwise is really interesting with this one. So yeah, back corners of the palate, you've got that nice, there's a nice little bit of smooth earthiness in there. As you move further forward, it gets a little bit herbal and more kind of woody, and as you reach the front corners of your palate, you're getting a little bit of floral character, but again, it's very, very smooth. But round the front curve of your tongue, it's a little bit lighter and more grassy, I would say. So yeah, that's interesting too. But let's look at the front third of your palate then, and the fruity side of things. And the fruity side of the beer that you get on the front third of your palate is from a mixture of the barrel and also from the hoppy side of the beer. So yeah, border reaching between front third and middle third of your palate, you get that nice little bit of bready build up in there again, the kind of rye bread in the base, the sort of pumpernickel-y sweet brown bread in the middle, then the more wholemeal brown bread on the top. The base of that front third of your palate is the smooth oak, the grapey kind of character, the kind of brown bready, yeah, the sort of brown bready bread crust, the rye bread, the wholemeal brown, yeah, and then the different layers there, and a bit of the leathery brown sugar, but it shows you a wee bit more of a kind of toffee-ish character further forward. But then yeah, we've got the sour characters from the barrel coming in on top of that, as we spoke about earlier, and then yeah, you've got that nice oily bubble where the fruity juicy esters from the hops roll their way out of the beer too. So let's focus on those hoppy fruits to round off the flavour section of the video. So yeah, the flavour section of the video has been really interesting with this one, I have to say that, but the fruity side of this one, it's kind of suppressed a wee bit. This is the difficult part of it, because it's kind of suppressed a wee bit by the, yeah, it's kind of suppressed a wee bit by the barrel in a sense. But yeah, if you keep an eye on that front third of your palate into the aftertaste, there's a wee bit of, yeah, you know, you've got at the back of that front third of your palate, you've got like a little bit of an oily plummy character, but then underneath a little bit more of a dry prune. And as you move further forward, there's a little bit of a figgy sort of note to it. And then into the front half of that front third of your tongue, within that oily bubble, it's kind of like, yeah, it's kind of got a more black curranty type character to it, I would say. So yeah, the way that all of that kind of pieces together in this one, I think is really, really interesting. So it gets a big thumbs up from me in that regard. I really do like how all of that just pieces together. So yeah, interesting stuff. I really do like how all of that, how everything just pieces together in this one. It's a really interesting mix of this. As I say, it reminds me of that beer that I had from the number 4 brewery in Gdansk, the Chitiry. It had the Polish name, but it was like District Number 4 or something. Yeah, something like that was the name of the brewery in Gdansk. This one really, really reminds me of that beer actually. So it's a nice balance between like a kind of white wine barrel aged beer and a Doppelbock. And it shows more of its Doppelbocky character into the aftertaste. But yeah, it's maybe about 2/3 wild ale this one and 1/3 Doppelbock. I think that's a fair way to describe the flavour composition of this one. But let's round off the review then with a wee quick look at the mouthfeel. So yeah, for me, mouthfeel wise, this one is gonna, like, I'd say it's kind of full bodied. The carbonation is pretty much non-existent in this. It's a big slick oily kind of thing, which you often find with wild ales. But yeah, I think with this one, we've not, the elephant in the room is the kind of Brettanomyces. The Brettanomyces is pushing all these kind of bready and woody sort of flavours in the beer. So I think the Brettanomyces is giving you a little bit of dryness into the aftertaste with this one as well. But yeah, it's really kind of an oily, slick beer in the beginning and slightly more dry and smooth into the aftertaste. But yeah, you have The malt base and the woody things, it's a bit drier underneath, smoother in the middle, and it gives you a dry sweetness on top. There's a sharper kind of impact in this one, but it's not too sour, I would say. Lovely oily fruits leaning toward the dry end of the spectrum. And then, yeah, just the way that this whole thing pieces together, I think is very, very interesting. So yeah, all I can say about this one is that you really need to try it for yourself and see what you think. But this is one that certainly tested my palate, and I've enjoyed the fact that it's done so. Yeah, IBU wise, I think that's the only thing we've not mentioned so far. I think technically this beer will be 0 IBUs, but 5 IBUs at the most, something like that. But it really works, and it's a very, very interesting beer. So if you come across this one, it is worth trying, and I'm very thankful that Amanda brought this one for me to do a review of here on the channel. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. This was the number 7 Doppelbrett, a 13%, 18-month wine barrel aged Bretted Doppelbock. Absolutely worth trying. I've really enjoyed this. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Cervecería Granizo as well, and we will be returning to these guys again in videos very, very soon. Until then, slàinte, skål, cheers. Check out my social media, check out Granizo's social media, and I'll see you guys another one. A 13% wine barrel aged and Bretted Doppelbock from Quilpué near Valparaiso in Chile. So yeah, very unusual stuff. Slàinte, skål, and cheers.